Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new session with Code with Sally. The session run every Thursday at 7 p.m. We will be off the next 2 weeks, and I will see you on the third week. The recording of the sessions are on YouTube channel, Code with Sally. If you missed any of the sessions or you want to review what we covered so far, you can check the recordings. Today is a new session in the series where we are talking about Salesforce objects as objects. We spoke last time and the one before about what are as objects, how we can use them, how we can use to create a list of accounts, what's the best practices, error handling. Today, we'll start with an interesting topic. I don't know if everyone got the chance to deal with it on their day-to-day work or not, but if not, we'll be talking about it. And it's the generic sObject. So just a quick reminder, when we said sObject, we said it's kind of similar to a class, and we'll have attributes in the class, and the attributes represent the field's name. So we said an example that you can have for each standard or custom object, you will have an sObject class. So for example, account, we have the account, and you can create an object from it, and then you can initialize it. And then you can, you can set the attributes here, like as if you are working with a normal class and normal objects, creating them. So the attributes are the field's name, and we introduced how we do the insert, the update, how we can delete, and how we can read using SOCO, and how we can move from just dealing with one object to a list of accounts as well. So until then, I think we were clear about it. We didn't yet introduce anything yet. The sObjects, the generic are sObjects. The purpose of it, it's a general purpose class type in Apex. What do I mean by that? Here, when we say account, that means it's a specific class called account. And when we are creating an account object, I know it's of type account. But if I say I have sObject generic object, that means it's a generic object. I don't know its specific type. I don't know if it's an account or it's a contact or it's an account or a case. So we are talking about the type sObject specifically this time, not a specific type like accounts or contacts. And we want to see when or what's the purpose of using it, and when we will get the chance to deal with it in real life or like in projects and use cases that maybe at some point you will benefit of using it for. So again, what we want to cover is not the specific account, contact, or custom object sObject classes. We are covering this time the generic. And we can think about it that if, for example, account class, that's account class. If you remember when we were talking about the object-oriented, we said we have inheritance. So you can have a base class and you have subclasses that inherit from the base class and can add functionality to it. So the same, we can consider that the account sObject class, it's an inherited version of sObject. So the sObject is the base class that we are dealing with when we work with sObjects. And that means that it has like when we saw with the inheritance, the base or the generic like class, the parent class will have some methods, some attributes that the child records or the child classes can use. So account is a specific type of Salesforce object that's the child class, and it will inherit the methods that we have in the parent class, which is sObject. Let's see, what do I mean by that? So let me create here an example for you. So I have here, we created an account class, an account object from contact class, from account class, and we gave it a name tech org Thursday, for example. So if I have the same name, it's not posing any issues. And then let me assign it to an sObject. Or before that, let me first comment this one. I will show you here when we talk about Salesforce documentation. We saw, for example, when we worked with the data type integer, we had a class for integer class. We had for list, for sets, and so on. So the same, we have here one for the base class that is called sObject class. And for example, we have a method that is called getSObjectType. This method, when we call it, it returns what's the data type or what's the type of the object you are dealing with. So if I take this one here and I go and say system.debug and I say account object dot get sObjectType, you remember we said that this is the sObjectType is the base class and account class is inheriting it. So if you remember when we talked about inheritance, the child class can access the methods from the parent class. So the sObjectType, get sObjectType is the method on the base class, which is the sObject, as we saw here. sObject class, we have this method that we can use. So, and it returns what's the object type. So it's not defined on account class. It's just in the sObject, the base, but because we are inheriting it, we can access it. So I will run this here. If I see the debug log, you will see now it gave me, when I did what's the sObjectType, it gave me that the type of the sObject I'm working with is account. And that's because account is inheriting the methods of the sObject class. And I can assign the account object to the parent object here, which is type as object, because it's, again, it's a base class, the sObject, and the account is inheriting from it. So I can use it to get it. And that's just an idea that it's when we are talking about generic sObject, we are talking about the base class of all the sObjects that you can have. And we said for each of the standard objects, you will have an sObject, like the account. If you have a custom object, you'll have a sObject for it with the same name of the custom object that you will be creating. But the most important thing that we know that all of those are inheriting the base class from the base class. Upcasting means taking the child and assigning it to the parent. So I have here parent object is of type sObject. And this one, this is the child. So I have here account object is a child, and the parent object, this is the base class. Base class. So child class. So when I take the child object and assign it to a parent, so that means I'm upcasting, I'm moving up a level. If I can deal with it as the parent object now. But when I will deal with it as a parent object, I can access the parent specific methods and attributes only. What do I mean by that? I can say here account object dot here I will do parent object instead. Here through the account, I'm using method from the parent through the child. Here I'm using the same method that already exists on the parent, and we saw it in the documentation. So here I did upcasting. I assign the child object to a parent class object. So that's upcasting. I'm moving up a level, but I can still access here the same method, because the method that got me the account object type is already in the parent object. But if I try to do system.debug and I try from the parent access name and I try here, we know that account object dot name. We know that here I can, from the account, I can say account object and I can do name. But here, sorry, I meant to use parent object. Parent name. If I do that, it will give me an error at line 11. It should. So line 11, it tells me that it cannot find a variable called name because the name is a specific value or a specific attribute that exists now only in the child object. So that's the difference. Like if I do upcasting, I can and deal with the parent object now. I can still access anything that is in the parent class, but I will lose access to any of the child attributes. To do that, I have to do downcasting. I cast it back to account. And to do that, let me take it for you here. So this is step 3, casting back to the account class. So I can access the account specific fields. That's what we call downcasting. And that means here, I would say, again, take parent object, cast it as account, and put it in specific account. Now, if I print here the specific account dot name, now I can access the name again. Sorry, line 11. Yeah, let me comment this because this will keep giving me an error because I'm trying to access from the parent an attribute in the child and I don't have access to that. So we have to downcast it again to the child type and I can have access to the name again. So again, the main thing that we want to know that any standard or custom object, they have an sObject class. The sObject class name is usually the same as the object name. If it's standard, so it's the object's name standard, or if it's custom, the same. But we need to know that any sObject class for any of those objects is just an inheritance from the generic class, which is called sObject. When to use the sObject generic, that's what we want to learn about. But it's always important that when you do upcasting, which means you are using a child object in the format of the parent, you lose the specifics of this child class attributes. And that's why line 11 here was giving me an error because the sObject class doesn't have the name. Can we define an attribute for the sObject class? No, the sObject class is it's a class that Salesforce created for us. We are using it. And the same, you cannot create an attribute for the account. You can create a new field in the account object and then use it as an attribute. But it's not a class that we are custom defining. It's generated for us when we create a new custom object. But the attributes are mimicking the fields that we have. And that's what we covered in the first 2 sessions. And no, we cannot add just an attribute. We can add a new field to account, but we'll be always adding to account object or contact. But here we are just differentiating between the parent, which is the sObject, versus the account, contact, custom object, sObject. They are child classes that are inheriting from the parent, which is the sObject. When you deal with the parent sObject, you can deal with it, but you lose the attributes. Like you cannot access the attributes on the child. To in order to use the attributes on the child, you have to downcast, like you don't deal with the generic, you deal with the specific account object type. But child or parent, we have access to all the methods we have here in the sObject class, because that's the base class we have. Any questions so far? We are good? Okay. Okay, let's move on next then. When would we use the generic sObject? Because to be honest, like it's not a very basic topic, but I wanted you to know it, and maybe we'll cover it in more depth in the future in higher levels of the sessions. But you need to know, because we spoke about account, context, and sObjects, that there is a base class for them, and we can deal with the base class directly. And I want to give you a flavor when we can use them, or what are the use cases for them. So one of the use cases we want to be using it for is the flexibility of handling different data types in one operation. What does that mean? Like, let me put this for you in the chat in case you want to refer to it. Mhm. I'm putting it in Slack, but it's not allowing me. Okay, yeah. So let me clear this one. Now I can have account object equal new account. And I can give it a name, Thursday account 1. And then I can create contact object equal new contact. And I can give it first name, Alice, and last name, for example, Smith. So I have here created an object of contact, and I can create opportunity as well. Opportunity object equal new opportunity. And I can have here name, new deal, and stage, for example. Sorry. Stage name, prospecting, and close date, for example, date dot today dot add days. I want it to close in 2 days. And that's it. Now I created 3 objects, one of type account, one of type contact, one of type opportunity. Based on what we learned before, like how can I insert the account or contact or opportunity? Anyone can remember how we can insert the sObjects we created just now? I'm checking the chat as well. Fumi, you were unmuted. Do you want to say? Yes, correct. Yeah, we can use insert. So I can do insert account object. And then I can say insert contact object. And then insert opportunity object. So now how many DMLs I have? 1 DML statement, 2 DML statements, and the third one here. So I have 3 of them. I could do something different. I can use generic sObject. I can create a list of sObject, because we agreed that account, contact, opportunity, they are 3 different sObjects, but each of them is inheriting from the base class, which is sObject. So I can create a list of sObjects here, records, and I will initialize the list as empty list. Now, how can I insert the account, contact, and opportunity in the list of records? Anyone can remember from the list session? Okay, correct. So I can do dot add, and I can add account object, and I can do the same for the contact and the same for the opportunity. So I can have here contact, and here I have opportunity. So now my list has 3 records. If I insert here list of records, how many records will be created? How many records do you have for me in the list? Right. So I have 3 records, 3 objects added, one for account, one for contact, and one for opportunity. So when I will insert the records, 3 of them will be created. But how many DMLs I have? Only 1 DML. So it's only 1 statement. Let me try it. I will search here for account with that name. Account. We don't have it. So let's run this one and see it. And here, no, we didn't do any debug statements. But if I see now, I have this account got created. I show the name for it. I see Thursday account, contact, and we said first name is Alice, I believe. So I have 2 the same name. I created one with the same name before, but if I do the time, so only one of them was created the 5th of September, so it's today. So that means one DML statement got executed, but it created for me 3 records regardless of their data type. So one of them was account, one of them was contact, and one of them is opportunity. Is that clear? Any questions? Okay. Just want to give you heads up that while one time I was working on a project and I saw an error that I never saw before, and it took me some time to figure out the reason. So I will paste here the code that will simulate the error. I want to show you the error first, then I will explain to you the root cause of the error and what do you need to do. But I need you to ask any questions you have so far before running this code and showing you the error. So I'll check the chat now. No questions. Let me run the code and show you the error. So one time I was working on a project and I got this error. Cannot have more than 10 chunks in a single operation. Please rearrange the data to reduce chunking. So that error I never saw before. And the root cause was something kind of similar to what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is that I have a loop 10 times. I create one account, one contact, one opportunity. And each time I created, I added to a generic list of sObjects. And then I do another account, another contact, another opportunity, and so on 10 times. So that will end that I have account, contact, opportunity. I will have them in that order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on, 10 times. And that's why it's causing an issue. Because when we have a list of generic sObjects and we run it, it will chunk it by time. So we'll have here, this will be considered chunk 1. And then it's a different type. So it will say it's chunk 2. And then this is 3. Then this is 4 because it's account. It's different from the one before. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. and then it will come here. This is the 10th chunk because account is different than opportunity. Then here 11, and that will start giving us the error because it will say I have more than 10 chunks. So what's the solution? And because we want to be able to use generic sObjects, the solution is to put them in order, like put all the accounts together first, then all the contexts, then all the opportunities. So it will chunk them into 3 types. First accounts, then contexts, then opportunities. So we don't get into this error. So to mimic here, let me give you this one with the error. Okay, I cannot put it in the chat in the session here. I put it in Slack. So I will do here. And I put it in Slack, both Slack, the military and Podosal, because it's too big for to put it in the chat here in Zoom. So the solution is to put them into chunks myself, like all the accounts together, then all the contexts, then all the opportunities. Any suggestion how to fix the code? So we have 3 different distinct chunks based on the type and be able to run it. Any clue? I want all accounts first, then all contexts, then all opportunities. What can we do? Okay, so let me do it for you here. I will do the loop 10 times first to create the accounts. So that means I have 10 accounts added. Then another loop to add all the contacts. Then a third loop to create all the opportunities. Correct, yes, Steve. So I will have 3 for loops. One for contacts, one for contacts, one for accounts, and one for opportunities. So when I do that, I will have here account 1, 2, 3, 4 until the 10th. Then I will have contacts from 1, 2, 3 until the 10th. Then I will have opportunity 1, 2, 3 until the 10th. And when it will be separated into chunks, I will have this one. This is a second chunk, and this is a third chunk. So this is how the chunks will be separated, and then this code should work in that case. Let me add here Thursday and Thursday and you deal Thursday and try. So if I run the same code now, but with 3 different loops, we didn't get the previous error that we got. And now you'll see that 10 accounts got created, 10 contacts got created, 10 opportunities got created. So in total, I have 30 records that got created with only one DML statement. Okay, so that's the idea behind creating multiple records together using the generic loop, a generic sObject. And the benefit, as you saw, like we can have, instead of multiple DML statements, we can have only one. So we avoid having any limits, hitting any limits if possible. And if that's like something we are happy to do, we can store them, but be careful because I got this error, like the 10 chunks, I faced it and it was a weird error that I never saw. So just be mindful how you will order and arrange your records into your list of the generic sObjects, so it's not exceeding the 10 chunks. Any questions so far? Yes, Dan.
So question, so when you create it like that, the contacts, the accounts, and the cases, and when they are created inside the org, are they going to be related? Like, for example, if we created, let's see, 10 contacts, and one of the contacts is Juan, okay, and it created a case, it's gonna be under one, or it's also gonna create context for those cases?
So it's the same, like here I created contacts and account, right? That's what similar to what you are expecting or you're asking about. So let me duplicate here. If I go to the record, you shouldn't find them linked because I didn't add the relationship. Like here, the account is empty. In the previous video, in the previous session, we were talking about how creating records that actually are linked together. Like for the use case we have here, the scenario I wanted to show you is more that I'm creating unrelated records, but how I can benefit of the sObject, the generic, and how I can minimize the DML statements and just insert everything together. But they are not related because if you remember from last time, for me, in order for me to relate this contact to an account, I should have here account ID and set what's the account ID I want. So when we create the parent and child records, we have to add one parent first and then the child record after and related to the parent. So we know what's the parent and what's the child record.
Okay, perfect. Thank
But
you.
here they are not related. The purpose was mainly to show you how to use or work with the generic sObject. Okay. Okay. So that was one way of how you can benefit of generic sObject. And it won't be useful if you are working with parent-child records, as Danny asked, but it may be useful if you are working with different unrelated, like you have a logic that will create accounts and will create students and will create, for example, you have CSV coming and it will create accounts, students, teachers, and they are 3 different objects. But you can take the accounts and add it to sObject list, students, teachers, and insert all of them together. So it's mainly whenever you have different types and you want to insert all together, just be mindful about the order. Another use case that sometimes we tend to use generic sObject is whenever we want to handle unknown object types dynamically. What do I mean by handling sObject type? First, let me show you here an example to explain it. So I take this copy and I have here. So here, dynamically handling unknown object types. So I have 2 DML statements, but I am commenting the first one, and then we'll comment it and execute it with the second one to mimic the generic behavior, or the dynamic behavior of the code. So here I have a generic sObject. So I have a select statement that will return an account, and I'm doing a limit 1, so I know it will return only 1. But instead of putting it in account, I'm putting it in sObject. So here I have an if statement. There is a way to check what's the type. So I'm saying, is the generic object is an instance of account, or it's an instance of a contact, or something else. If it's instance of account, I do here downcasting, downcasting to account, so I can access the account name. If it's contact, I will do downcasting to contact or typecast. I'm typecasting it to account or to contact, specifically based on the type. And then here I'm showing, for example, the last name, or I can show as well first name. The first name. Okay, and let me add it here so I don't forget. And else, if it's something else, show me that it's unknown type. So let's try. Here I'm doing first with an account. What do we expect to see when I execute the code? Will it show me account name or contact name or unknown object type? Checking the chat. Account name, correct. So let's try it. I will execute, correct, Steve. So I will have here that the account that we got selected, the name for it was code with Sally 2. So what happened that this line got executed? What if I have commented this and ran this code? What do we expect to see? Account name as well? I'm checking the chat. Contact and unknown object type. Let's see that. So here, this is a contact where, okay, yes, Fimi. So we are getting contact. So when we try, is it of instance account? The answer is no. So it will go for the another else here, which is contact, and we'll see that it will execute this, show me the last name and first name for it. So let's try this one. So it will show me first name and name Smith, and the first name here is Alice. So what if I do instead of that? Let's try ID from case, for example. What do I get? The account, contact, or I will go to the else statement. A note, because I'm not having an else if where the instance of type case. So if I will execute it now, I'll have a known object type and so on. So if, for example, I wanted to show with the case, if the case is what's passed, something specific, I can do this. So what's the benefit of that? Like sometimes you want to have dynamic code. Like I have, let's say, a method that will return message with a specific format. And this specific format will be different if I pass account versus if I pass contact versus if I pass product. So I can have my method accepting sObject, the generic, and then I can check the instance type. And based on the instance type and the type of this sObject, I can do the casting and then format my message and return it. So that's what we mean by dynamic type check. That we don't know what's the generic object, and we tried once passing account, once passing contact, one passing case. I can do this with any data type if I want, and it's up to me to handle which data type and what's the format that I will be returning. So that's the use case or the benefit of dynamic instance. If you want to have a utility or something generic where you will have different data types and you want to handle all of them instead of having a method to return the account name and another method to return the contact details format and another method to return the case details. I may have only one, and based on the type, I return the message in the format that I want. Again, it's not very common on day-to-day basis to be using this, but it's a good idea, in my opinion, to know about it. In case you need it, you have the idea about it and how to use it, and you may benefit of the knowledge you have. Any questions? Okay, and this is happening runtime. Like runtime, we take the generic object, typecast it as an account or downcasting to account, and then start choosing the account attributes. If I tried before here, if I try this one here, but on the generic object before, anyone expect the same result for the before and after for account, or the behavior will be different? Any expectations? Checking the chat. Will we get the same result with the before and after? So, okay, let me answer you. So here, sorry, let me move this. And we'll get an error here. Error will be thrown here. Why? Because I'm trying from the base class, which is generic, to access an attribute in the child class, which is the account. So the sObject, which is generic object, is an sObject because it's an instance of account, but I didn't cast it yet to account. So until here, it's an sObject. So if I try to execute it, it would tell me at line 8 that variable does not exist. The name does not exist because this is an attribute on the child class. It's not an attribute on the base. And generic object until that point is a base class. So the name will throw an error because it's only in the attribute. So we have to cast it, and then I would be able to access the name. Okay, so before and after would be different. The before would give you an error. The after will show the name because I am able to cast it to account. And once I cast it as an account, I can access the name, which is an attribute for the account sObject itself. Make sense? Steve, is it clear? Thank you, Fimi. Steve, Danny. Okay. I'm waiting for Steve. Okay. And maybe Steve, ask me whatever question you have. Like, I'm happy to answer your questions. If you have a question now, I'm happy to answer it. And if you want at the end of the session to cover it as well, I'm happy to do that. Okay. So that's the flexibility that we can have using generic sObject. One is that we can use multiple sObject in one list and handle different operation on them, like insert, update together. Maybe you can have a method that any objects you are inserting now, I want the owner for them to be, for example, a specific user in your org. So maybe I would be passing sObjects to a method to set the ownership for them and update it. So I can pass multiple accounts, contacts, leads, cases together, go get it down, and go send it all to one method, process them as sObjects and update the ownership and then update them. The other way of handling things is the dynamic and the dynamic type check. And that's what we did with the instance of that. We are checking if it's account do something, if it's a contact do something else, and so on. So that's another benefit of generic sObjects. So again, we saw that we can combine multiple DML statements in only one by using the list of generic sObjects. So that reduces sometimes complexity, and you can have a single DML operation, but which would be better for you in some cases than multiple. We saw how we can do dynamic data handling. So again, you can have one method that you call, and based on the type, it redirects you to another type specific methods, or do something, or return a message in a certain format, as we saw using the instance of. So that's a benefit that you can use. Again, code reusability and maintenance. For example, if I have only one method to return a welcome message, that the format will be different from type to type. Now, if I want to handle in the future leads, I can come here and say, if it's else if lead, cast it as a lead, and do whatever you want. So lead object, and I can do here show lead details, and I print the details of the lead. So it's easy for me now. Instead of, for example, if I want to support a new message format for a new object, instead of creating a new method and calling a new method, I still have the same message method. I have the code in one spot, just add an else if for handling a new data type. And here you go, it's up and running. So sometimes, in some cases, it makes sense to have it, and it makes your code more reusable and easier to maintain. Another thing, and that's where I had in my project, there was a need to handle the transactions between multiple unrelated records and to make sure all of them either pass together or fail together. And I don't remember now why I had the discussion with one of my colleagues whether to use transactions, and that's something we'll see later on how we do it. But the other way of then using transactions, if someone did it, was to have all of them in a list of sObject, and we'll continue the code as if we are adding them, but then we do insert list of records. And if you remember when we discussed about partial success, we said we can use database.insert with all or none false, or we said if we want all to fail together, then no need to do database.insert and just use insert list of record, because the behavior of inserting list of records, it will fail if any of them fails. So maybe sometimes if you want to handle like the transaction control and you want to control that all fail together for multiple data types or different records, unrelated records, that would be the way to do it, using the list of generic sObjects and try to insert it all. But again, be careful, because this is where I got the error of the chunks, and I had to make sure each data type is inserted together. So when the chunks are calculated, when the insert is happening, all the data type one are together, then the second data type, then the third. So that's another use case for transactions and how you can control it. When not to use generic sObjects. As you saw, like it's not very straightforward. Maybe it's not very common and not everyone is using it on day to day. So sometimes it's a better idea to, unless you need to use it and there is a real need to use it, to avoid it, to avoid complexity or avoid like junior developers to be confused what is sObjects and how we are doing things. But sometimes it's a good way to implement things. So you have to be mindful if you really need it or not. The other thing is not to use it if you know 100% you are using or creating a functionality that is using only one object type. For example, if I know 100% that I'm archiving or deleting old accounts, I know 100%, for example, my method is dealing only with accounts, or I'm creating a UI to collect account details and I will create them. So I know 100% this is very specific account, one object type. So then there is no need to work with generic sObjects, because it will add complexity that you don't need to. So keep it simple if there is no need for that. Also, be careful and mindful when you need to have use object specific methods. Like you have a method that is expecting lead, or it needs to to use the contact details, then it's better to avoid again the generic, because instead of passing generic and then cast it to contact to do specific things for contacts and return it, and you are not doing anything. So it's a mix between like one object and I need to like use specific details of the contact, then there is no need to use the generic sObject. So again, so I don't confuse you, be mindful, use it whenever it's really needed. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't use it if you are creating something that is object specific. If you see, for example, yourself having over and over the same function between contacts, accounts, and opportunities with minor changes, and you are repeating code, then okay, I have to stop and think. I'm repeating code, I'm repeating myself. I need to have something generic. Then maybe at that point it's better idea to create an sObject and just typecast the differences between account contacts to get certain details. Let's say you are sending an email and everything is the same except dear and first name, last name, or dear owner of account, blah, blah, blah. And it's only one line that you want to be generic. Maybe that's where it means everything is common. You can use it in one method and handle the differences at the top. And then instead of repeating your code over and over again, I use the rest of your code the same between the three. So again, be mindful. Don't overuse it. Use it when needed. Be careful when you have a list of sObject of the chunks and the order for them. And always to remember, when you are dealing with the child, you have to cast it. Like if you have a sObject and you need to cast it to the child object if you want to get the attributes. But if you are dealing with the base or a child as a base, you have all the sObject methods here available for you. You can use it. So that's the main thing that you need to remember. Any questions so far? Okay. So next time, when we come back from the break, we'll continue with the best practices, talking about these 5 best practices. We'll take it with some code so you can see the bad practice and how the good practice is used. So we'll see that in action when we come back. Just want to double check the date so I don't confuse you. So I'll be off on the 12th and the 19th. So I will see you back on the 26th. So we'll focus on the best practices. And after that, I will answer any questions you have for the homework. So I'll take some screenshots for you again. If you were not here last time, I pasted for you. And after the session, I put it as well in the Slack. So next time on the 26th, we'll finish the best practices and I will answer any questions you have on the homework. Or if you don't have questions, I would ask you to choose come ready for the session, either with questions or request. Like let's do exercise 5, start with 5 and then 6 and then 3, because we may not have the time to finish all the exercises together in the session. But if you put them in order, what do you prefer to cover first? Whenever we finish the best practices, we'll go through the exercises in the order you wish to cover. Again, thank you so much for attending today. I hope it wasn't overwhelming and I hope it was useful. It's not a very basic topic. I just wanted to have it while talking about sObjects so you know it exists. We may cover it in the future again with more examples and more use cases. But for now, know that it exists, know the basics, how to use it in casting and what's the difference between the base and the child, and maybe a review inheritance that we covered as well a bit when we talked about object-oriented. Happy to answer any questions if you have now or in the future. I'm available on LinkedIn and on Slack. If you have any questions, ping me and I will do my best to get back as soon as I can. Again, try to work with the exercises and we'll go through them with the order you guys will suggest once we finish the best practices on the 26th of September. Again, thank you so much, and I will see you on the 26th of September. And thank you so much for attending. And if you're watching the session, thank you for watching.